It's not just the Catholic Church. It turns out, this is the top story right now in the Axios newsletter, axios.com. Thousands of migrant youth allegedly suffered sexual abuse in U.S. custody. Thousands. They've got it broken down by month, by year, by perpetrator, all these kinds of things. You know, we have all talked about how terrible it is that children are being torn away from their parents, the trauma that they're suffering. And now we find that there are literally thousands of allegations of sexual abuse. This is in addition to physical abuse and the obvious psychological and emotional abuse of simply being torn from their parents. This is what Donald Trump and Kristen Nielsen, or however, you know, the head of DHS, and John Kelly and Mike Pence have brought to us with the complicity of all the Republicans in Congress. This is insane. Meanwhile, how do these guys stay in office? How do they even get in office? Dark money. Every time some wimpy politician or some self-appointed media pundit says, you know, we can't pay for Medicare for all. How are you going to pay for free college? How are we going to pay for better wages? Know that the reason why they're saying that is really simple. Billions, literally billions of dollars in dark, untraceable cash being poured from billionaires and big corporations into the pockets of politicians, media figures, and so-called think tanks that are basically PR organizations for a particular corporate point of view. The Supreme Court overturned laws against this back in 1976 in the Buckley case when they legalized this kind of corruption, put it on steroids in 2010 with Citizens United, leading us straight, but back in 76, that decision, and then the First National Bank versus Bellotti in 78, those decisions led us straight into the swamp of the so-called Reagan Revolution, taking control of America away from voters and putting it into the hands of lobbyists, big corporations, and multimillionaire politicians like Mitch McConnell. We know now from Page and Gillen's study at, I believe it was Columbia, might have been Northwestern, but whatever. You can easily find it. It's a 2-year-old study, as I recall, where they found that if you look at the wishes of the average electorate, the bottom 90% of Americans, if you look at what they want, the political outcomes that they want, what are the things, what are their priorities? They are as likely to be enacted into law as random noise. In other words, the bottom 90% of us are literally completely ignored by the political class. Now, I don't know how you call that a democracy, whereas the desires of the top 10% are measurably more likely to go into effect, and the desires of the top 0.01% are aggressively being put into law, which is why their wealth is just exploding, whereas even the top 1%, their wealth is not exploding as fast as the top 1/100th of 1%. We're in an oligarchy. And why? The Supreme Court gave it to us. The Supreme Court said, oh yeah, corruption's just fine. You know, money's the same thing as free speech. And guess what? An entire political party, the Republican Party, said, cool, we'll take that. And, you know, a chunk of the Democratic Party did too, you know, to be candid. And you know, the good news is the Democratic Party is moving away from that as fast as possible. Elizabeth Warren, for example, just announced she's not even going to do high money fundraisers. You know, these kind of fundraisers that have long been staples of both parties, where you get, you know, a candidate for president and they invite a bunch of donors and it's, you know, $50,000 plate dinner or $10,000 plate dinner. She's just not going to do those, period. Now, you know, is she disarming herself? I don't know. But you know, it's a good question. But the Federal Election Commission reports that over $1 billion from secretive billionaires and corporate hands flooded into our political bloodstream just since 2016, and expect more next year. And this is why corporations get deregulation, so they can increase pollution and they can rip you off with loans and things, while suicide and drug addiction rates are exploding among working people, particularly in red states where people are losing access to health care and they know that their kids' futures are screwed, even worse than in blue states. From crumbling roads and bridges to failing schools to poisoned water supplies to explosions of cancer and chronic disease, this all goes back to the evil of dark money flowing through the veins of our political system. And it's personal. I mean, my cat Higgins was poisoned by Chinese cat food around 2007. The melanin or melamine, it's not the pigment, it's a chemical that sounds like that, melamine, I think it was. They were, you know, when you test food for protein, this chemical, which is used in making plastics, shows up as high protein. And so they were adding it to pet food and shipping it to the United States, literally by the ton, all over the country. Thousands of dead cats and dogs, and probably hundreds of thousands of them with damaged kidneys. My cat was one of them. Democracy, our democracy is screwed because of this. Does your vote count? I mean, you know, we're now learning that one of the big voting machine companies just made a huge, you know, six-figure contribution to the Republican Party. How does your vote count when you know, votes are being suppressed? I mean, this just goes on and on and on. Over at truthout.org, Anna Masaglia writes, secret donor-funded dark money spending reported to the Federal Election Commission has officially exceeded $1 billion, according to a new analysis by the Center for Responsive Politics. And that barely begins to scratch the surface of political spending by groups that don't fully disclose their donors. You know, spending by groups that don't disclose their donors has exceeded $2 billion just since 2006. More than half of all 2018 election spending, this is just a year and a half ago, was by outside groups that don't fully disclose their donors. The 2018 election cycle, more than $539 million by spending by groups that don't fully disclose their donors. This is the poison in the bloodstream of our body politic. I'm wondering, you know, I can point to my cat getting sick. I can point to health crises in my own family that I believe are caused by poisons in our food supply. I can, you know, we can. I mean, it's like how is this affecting you? I look at the student loans that my kids have and that my friends' kids have that are in some cases just crippling them. Yeah, you just, I mean, these are just some of the obvious things. By the way, apropos of student loans, I mentioned yesterday, I think on the air, that in Denmark they pay you $200 a month to go to school. Martin Stender tweets, "Hey Tom, just a minor correction regarding stipends while studying in Denmark. It is up to $466 if you live with your parents and $938 if you live by yourself." Seriously, in Denmark they pay you to go to school. Why? Because they know that if young people go to college, that not only do they make more money and pay more taxes, which means that the money all comes back to the government, in multiples, but also, they want to have a well-educated workforce and populace. I mean, that is necessary for democracy. So here we have this, and now, in the meantime, at the same time that Trump is putting together a climate denier task force, new research suggests that we're hitting a dangerous climate tipping point, and we're nearly there. And this is where the atmosphere warms to the point where what are called stratocumulus clouds, those really, really high clouds up there that reflect the sunlight back out into outer space, they just break up altogether because the atmosphere is warm. And when that happens, the temperature of the Earth will soar 8 degrees Celsius. That's 14 degrees Fahrenheit. And it has not been part of the climate models up to this point. Nobody's been able to figure out why in previous extinctions, sometimes in as few as a few hundred or a few thousand years, suddenly everything dies. Why? What's that sudden tipping point? They thought it was methane. Well, methane is a piece of it. But it looks like it's clouds. Brand new scientific information. And meanwhile, if you look at, well, here, this guy, Bill Wayrum, right? He's now at the EPA. He's the assistant administrator in charge of issues including climate change, smog, and power plants' mercury pollution. Who is he? He's a former partner of a company that was paid $8.2 million just in 2017 by 25 power companies and 6 industry trade groups, including Duke Energy, Southern Company, and AEP. The nation's biggest coal-burning power companies paid a top lobbying firm millions of dollars to fight Obama-era environmental rules, and now one of that firm's partners, this guy Bill Wayrum, is at the EPA making these decisions. Kathleen Clark, law professor at Washington University in St. Louis, says the scandal here is that this is legal. Meanwhile, who's refusing to back the Green New Deal? As we're learning this, once again, we get back to this dark money thing. The 12 senators co-sponsoring the Green New Deal have accepted about $1 million from people who work in coal, oil, gas industries. Okay, $1 million. The 88 senators who said, no, we're not going to support the Green New Deal, they have taken in close to $59 million, about $670,000 per person opposed to the Green New Deal. 7 times what the average sponsor took in. I mean, this is how bad it is